Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Chami. Welcome. I'm here with my friend Brett Naucke, and we are sponsored today by AMS, American Musical Supply. And today we are going to show you a comparison between the opsix and the Wavestate. And before we get too deep into it, let's just hear some sounds. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Brett, what's up?
Hey, thank you for having me.
Brett's awesome. He is also a fantastic synth player. And the reason we're doing this comparison today is because often, maybe some of you are surprised by this, maybe you're not, maybe this is your question, but a lot of people ask us, what is the difference between the opsix and the Wavestate? And I really think that this question comes from, if you look at these two synthesizers, they are the exact same size. They both have 37 full-size touch-sensitive keys, but really, I mean, beyond some of the effects and the filters that are on these two synthesizers, they are very different. Let's first talk about the opsix. So this is an FM synthesizer.
Yeah, FM synthesizers were really popular in the 80s. They're extremely complicated to program, and Korg has kind of figured out a really awesome way to make that really hands-on. Natalie can kind of speak to the more technical elements, but ultimately this is really the most hands-on way to create really, really complex sounds within a really easy interface.
For sure. And if you think about the Wavestate, what is a way to think about that? And then we'll get really deep into the nitty-gritty between these two synthesizers. But overall, this is an FM synthesizer. We're working with operators. We'll get into like what exactly that means if you're new to FM synths. And then the Wavestate.
Yeah, the Wavestate, I've been fortunate to be using these synthesizers pretty consistently for the past couple months, and with the opsix, I always gravitate towards, really like one really complex sound that I can kind of build up from nothing. With the Wavestate, I always think about animation and time-based movement things. So you can think about it as changing samples over time, step sequencing, wave shaping, all sorts of different things, but it is a sample-based engine, so it is a completely different way of actually like synthesizing sound. So it's actually sample-based, but you do have a number of these kind of common factors that you find on synthesizers, like filters, amplifiers, envelopes, etc. So while being a sample-based instrument, it's actually also very intuitive and generates a completely, much like this, generates completely unlimited range of sounds, but just very, very differently.
Super complex. The way we get the sounds is different, right? So we got an audio sampler, so straight up PCM in the Wavestate, recorded audio, all right? And then arranging them, manipulating them, so we get layers of sounds working together and evolving. and we'll talk more about that for sure. And then the opsix using operators with FM synthesis. Let's hear just another example of these two together. So we picked these specific sounds. I'm going to play, if you have an opsix and you're looking at yours, I think maybe Ian's like, I'm busy now, I'm playing my opsix. So this is number 130, Fantasia. Let's hear what this sounds like as is. Okay, so the opsix is really great for bell sounds. That's kind of why we picked this program.
Yeah, we chose the Beauty Vox and Violins performance on the Wavestate because it's using just completely unusual samples, violins, and vocal samples, which are very obviously hard to synthesize, if not impossible, in a lot of cases to make sound realistic. So I think this is a really cool performance for that kind of shows how different this can sound. So.
Let's play a little bit together.
Yeah.
My hands because, as you heard, the Wavestate keeps going, right? You want to talk a little bit about the playability of?
Yeah, I extended the release time on the envelope for that because this patch especially really plays out and it kind of shows you what happens over time when you're holding down one key. How many different samples that it's playing through. So it's actually playing through a couple different violin and vocal sounds on their own respective layers. And the really cool thing I think for sound design possibilities with this is just the things that can happen over time. They don't have to happen really fast. They can happen glacially slow. So I think that's a really big strong point about the Wavestate in particular.
Yeah. Anyway, where's everybody from? If you want to put it in the chat, I like to hear a little bit about you. And if you're just tuning in, I'm Natalie. I'm here with my friend Brett, and we are showing you a comparison between the opsix and the Wavestate. Again, I'm going to say, if you're like super into synthesis and you're like, that's an FM synth and that's a wave sequencing synthesizer, they're totally different. You're not wrong. But people have asked us this specific question because they are the same size. So I think often if you're totally new to synthesizers and you're like, I want to go buy a synth, these look pretty similar to me. Which one should I get? This is really maybe who we're targeting this question an answer to. So though I hope you enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the really interesting thing is that these are both capable of super, super complicated sounds, and they can do a lot of similar sounds. The opsix is great for any FM synthesizer for that matter, but opsix specifically is really, really great at reproducing very good sounding pianos or organs, various keyboard instruments, where this actually samples those sounds. So they are similar in that regard, in that they can come up with sounds, but from an approach standpoint, I really don't think of these anywhere near each other. Again, like kind of what I mentioned earlier, if I'm going for a very synthesized sound, you know, whether it's extremely complex or simple, I tend to go to the opsix. If I'm doing something that has anything based in like motion, animation, time-based things that you would a lot of times just associate with like a sampler or a DAW, I tend to go with the Wavestate.
Love that. And so let's break it down a little bit. I'm going to focus a little bit on the opsix first and just the basics of this, of how we get to sound. So an FM synthesizer, that stands for frequency modulation. I'm going to start from an initialized patch. So if you're new to synthesizers, that is just basically your like home base, your clear patch, nothing on it, no preset program or anything. So it's represented by INIT. Hit yes. And now the thing to discover, again, if you are new to FM synth, FM synthesis, understanding that the whole aspect around FM synthesizers are with operators. And the opsix, hence where it gets its name from, has 6 operators. And these operators are color-coded by red and blue, which I, by the way, thought was pink and purple before. My bad, if you ever watched a stream earlier. But red and blue. Red is representing a carrier. So I'm going to turn down all of these sliders, which is just the volume, the level of each operator that coincide with the ones below and above. So I'm looking at operator 1 right now. Operator 1 is red. It's existing as a carrier. Let's hear what just operator 1 sounds like. Okay, and if I turn the knob, you're actually going to go through different frequencies within octaves and fifths sometimes. So going to the left is making it lower, going to the right, super high. Okay, and then we have a modulator, blue. So right now, the way it is set up, this is modulating my first operator. The second operator is modulating, which means changing. Really, I like to think of it now, it's creating the like fluttering, crystally sounds beyond what you heard as just a foundation of tone. So again, operator 1 is changing the frequency, so the range of pitch, low or high notes, as simply as I can put it. And then operator 2 is kind of creating texture, modulation with that carrier. Okay, but then how do we know? Why is operator 1 a carrier and operator 2 is a modulator? So you can arrange how the operators exist, whether it's a carrier or a modulator, and that is called an algorithm. And the algorithm, as maybe you can see on my screen, it's set, if I turn my algorithm knob, there are 40 presets of arrangements of how each operator can exist with each other. And then you can create your own beyond that. So if I want operator 4 to modulate operator 1's carrier, I can do that. So that really is, you know, if I know that right now operator 3 is a carrier, I can bring in that second frequency. I'm going to turn this down. And then operator 4. So with some of the programs that I'll show you today, you'll see that this is, it'll change. The lights will change based on how it was programmed and which algorithms are being used. And then you can even, you'll just see. You can create chords with 6 operators. You can create really lush sounds. I noticed somebody said that oftentimes this is known for more bright sounds with FM synthesis, things that are punchier, more crisp. But with this synth, we kind of go beyond that even a little bit. Did I miss anything with FM synths?
I mean, it's such a complicated topic, and I know you've covered this in previous streams, but, you know, one thing that I like to use a lot is when I'm going through the sounds in this, being able to change the algorithm, like, arbitrarily as you're kind of just going through things will open up worlds of sound possibilities where you might have designed a sound with, you know, X algorithm, you know, changing it to Y might completely drastically change your sound or how you even approach it. So I think that's a really cool experience. Exactly.
So I'm not changing any of the knobs on the operators. That was just going through the different algorithms. I don't know if you can see it on my screen. Oh, I got into user.
Yeah, so again, like I like to just kind of scroll through those when I'm kind of starting with the sound, especially if I'm starting from like an initialized sound. Yeah, and I think, with the added, filters and effects and, sort of endless amounts of modulation, I think it's, it gets into experimental territory really fast. And I think that's what's so cool about being able to go from something like synthesizing, say, an electric piano sound, and then being able to synthesize really, really complicated drum sounds in the same, minute is really exciting and inspiring to use.
Thank you. I see some people are asking about the Modwave. Those just started shipping out, I think, this week. Where will this fit in? I actually love, and you will for sure see a stream about this. Okay, I know everyone's like, why not just do the Modwave stream? We're getting there. We wanted to answer some previous questions. Those are just now shipping out, so it would be really great to talk about that when some people have it or ready to purchase because we have them now. But the Modwave is not wave sequencing like the Wavestate. It is not an FM synthesizer. It is the same size, right? Mm-hmm. But what you want to say, if you said one sentence about what the Modwave is.
I just mean, wavetables. I know it's rooted, if I understand correctly, the DW8000, but it's just something that I used when I was younger. I think that's going to fit in much like these being similar but completely different. So I think it's,
wavetable synthesis is also another realm. It's layering waves, sound waves, like sine waves and a square wave all on top of each other and being able to manipulate those over top of each other. But I don't want to get into that because that's not what this stream is about. So your questions will be answered in the future. Stay looking for that in our Facebook and YouTube pages. For sure, you'll get some Modwave demos. Okay, let's talk about the Wavestate then.
Yeah, again, like the Wavestate is super unique in that it is actually a sample-based engine. So if we're starting out with this initialized patch, much like Natalie's, we're kind of just starting with a waveform, but we can actually change that waveform to thousands, if I understand, is it thousands?
Samples.
Thousands of different samples. So, I'm going through, if you can't see on the screen, I'm just choosing different samples for this wave. We got congos, there's a cymbal, these are all really high quality samples and they sound fantastic. What's really, really cool about this is that on every step of this sample, of our step sequence, we can have a different sample. So, if we go to, right now we're actually fading from the cymbal to a saw wave. So we'll actually just do this into a mandolin, which is a very goofy sound.
It's a good contrast.
Yeah,
to hear it.
And doing this over polyphony, we can change the speed of this. We can change effects. We can, really do anything, combine any amount of samples we want. So we could choose 16 different samples. We could choose any arbitrary length, and in that we can also change the timing in which these play into each other. We can change the pitch, like a very typical sort of pitch or step sequencer. We can change the wave shape. We can turn gates on and off, and we can do a number of other different things. And then we have, what's really cool is that we have control. We have filter control, like you would expect on any analog synthesizer, or most any synthesizer for that matter. We have filter control. We have envelope control, and then we can add in effects. So we start with a sample that can be as complicated or simple as it wants. In this case, a kind of mandolin-y sound. It's kind of silly. It's making me laugh every time. But you can see how quickly this went from, an initial saw wave to something completely different. So I think the way that the presets in the Wavestate are structured, I think it's really cool how far you can go with just changing a few samples. You'll end up in a completely different territory, again, in like 1 minute than, where you started.
I kind of want to describe my mic shift. I don't know if you heard that. I want to describe a little bit of the structure, the hierarchy of sound in the Wavestate in case you're new to it. So samples are your smallest parts. Samples can be put together. There's a 16-step sequencer. You can save each sample into each step. And then or only use 3 steps, or only use 1 step to have 1 sample. So that sample then gets grouped together into a program, and then the program, you can have multiple programs within a layer, which can you be my Vanna White and point to that? Yeah, those are the layers. And you can have 4 layers on the Wavestate. So what you end up getting is like layers and layers of audio samples together. And then I think, did I describe this earlier? In case you're just tuning in, I'll describe it again. The way the layers can work together is you have them on different lanes and they can shift in time. So if layer A is like 2 measures long or 8 beats long, and then layer B is 8 measures long. As it cycles and loops through, you're going to have this like bigger loop and then smaller loop going quite faster, right, than the one that's 8 measures. And then you're going to have this organic, evolving sound that's constantly moving. And you can manipulate it in real time with the mod knobs. So you can be like, oh, I want it to be a really short loop right now, but now I want layer B to be a longer loop. And all of that's hands-on in real life performance. Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously, like, this thing that we, this, again, really silly sound, which is happening for 2 steps, if we duplicated this 4 times and changed that to 5 steps and then 7 steps and then 9 steps, we can basically create these like really unusual polyphony, polyrhythms, sorry. And that's what's really neat about this is the Wavestate can be a really unusual drum machine if you wanted it to be, but it can also just be something that it's also a fantastic ambient machine where you could have a violin and a cello and, maybe a very more straightforward kind of synthesizer sound playing and completely out of time, happening, over minutes, changing. So I think that there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn out of this.
Let's hear some sounds. We did a lot of talking, describing. Let's hear it. All right, so we picked a few different programs on the opsix is what it's called, but then ultimate performances on the Wavestate. You may have heard FM synthesizers in 80s songs. Again, because of FM synthesis, you get this like crystally tone. It's really great for crisp sounds, bright sounds. Let's hear the Crystal Bells, program 135. Oh, and there's an arpeggiator on. I can turn that off if I wanted to, but let's keep it on. There's also some effects that you're hearing on top of this. More bass, I can change a carrier operator to get a lower frequency. Get some more sparkles in there. Crystal Bells. Love it. And, I'm just trying to make Brett laugh the whole time. Here's the algorithm. You can shift through that. You can manipulate it. So you can, So you can always start with a program and then see how it's built and make it your own, of course. All right.
Yeah, and kind of like, a similar like tip on that of just kind of, starting with something and changing it. I chose the Mallet Traveler patch for this because it's a really cool way of just going through samples in kind of like an arpeggiated fashion. So this also has an arpeggiator on it. So right now it kind of just sounds like, very typical triggered arpeggiator, but we're going to focus on the sample lane, which actually has several different samples. We're starting with this initial sort of mallet, but as we increase Now we're playing 2 different samples. Then
Love it. I'll be your Vanna White.
and then as we increase the amount of steps with our start and end, we're going to hear the same pitch, but we're actually just going to scanning through different of these sort of percussive samples. So I really like patches like this because we can start going in and just arbitrarily start changing our sample banks. And end up in a totally different place really, really fast. Maybe even randomize. We can also randomize the samples. There's also the ability to randomize any function on any of these, and I think that's awesome on the Wavestate, especially because you could just randomize the sample layers on just channel A. You could randomize the effects. You could randomize anything individually or the entire program just for some kind of extra inspiration.
Yeah, and like a percentage of it. Like you can be like,
exactly.
Only randomize 25% of layer A. I mean, it's sometimes better to do it at a lower percent, just a helpful tip. Otherwise, you can get super wild unless you're into that sort of thing.
Which you should be.
Yeah, you should be. Why not? You're dealing with synthesizers. I was going to say, oh, I know what I was thinking of when you were just playing that. So another thing, sometimes people, beginning synth players, ask me when they're looking to get a synth, they're like, do I have to learn how to play the piano to play a synthesizer? I see the keyboard. I think that the Wavestate in particular is really awesome for non-keyboard players because you're getting the textures from the samples. You're not necessarily having to play a chord. And sometimes playing a full chord is like too much because you already have like 16 samples times 4 layers on one key, right?
Absolutely. And I think, and also for, folks coming from like maybe a modular synthesis world, which I've spent, 10, 15 years using modular synthesizers, I don't tend to create music, or I don't tend to start with a keyboard. It's just not the most like inspiring way for me to start. So I think this is a really interesting synthesizer for that, where you can kind of start with, hit one key to kind of engage everything. You don't necessarily need to hit a key to engage everything if that's how you want to build it. But you can just kind of completely ignore the harmonic aspect and build really, really complex patterns around that without knowing any music theory or even, a black and white keyboard.
All right, here's my next opsix pick, Fairy Dust. Okay, we have an arpeggiator again. You might be like, that kind of sounded like the last one. I'll manipulate it so it's not. Sounds a little more woody and metallic at the same time. Love bringing out different harmonics with that operator 4. Another harmonic in there. Let's see what operator 6 is going to do. Some bass. Maybe less reverb. that's that.
The next patch I chose for the Wavestate was something to kind of get us out of arpeggiator land and into just this like totally glacially slow and unusual samples. This one's called Haunted Mansion. One thing I really like about this patch is one, that it sounds completely insane, but it's also really interesting what happens with samples when you drastically pitch them down or pitch them up, is they get very unusual sounding. So if we go to really low octaves for this, we'll get these really crazy deep low ends that happen, you know, sort of, these are fantastic sounds for, you know, if you're designing sound design for film, anything like that. I think this is a really inspiring synthesizer for that. And in the upper octaves, it just sounds completely different. But yeah, but yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for, you know, it's very easy to just like do these arpeggiated things. They're very fast and kind of like typical. But once you start slowing the global tempos down, once you start kind of moving through things a little bit differently, you get these very unusual sounds. And we're only using 3 of the layers. We could add a third layer that is one of these arpeggiated sounds. We could add a third layer that's just another one of those silly mandolin sounds that just plays on top of this. I don't know. I'm not really sure what you're doing with this, but maybe that's what you want to do. It's certainly possible. So, you know, thinking about things from a sound design perspective is great with this, where you can just think of 4 completely, you can kind of think of it as 4 synthesizers at once, if that's how you want to.
Totally. That's a good point. Yeah, with the 4 layers, they can be, 4 synths combined at once, kind of playing in whatever tempos that you want for each of them, you know. Where am I? Somebody asked about the voices, and I was like, I wonder if they mean like unison voices, or how many programs, or how many voices in a polyphony. So the opsix has 32 voice polyphony, meaning I can play 32 keys and hear them all at once. There's only 37 keys on here, so almost all the keys at once, and I would be able to hear a tone for each of them. It has 250 programs with 250 slots where you can put in your own user programs. And then it also has 8 voice unison, which brings me straight to this next program called Chord Streaming, number 74. So I'm going to play it as is when I just selected it. Here's a note. Okay, so you're hearing multiple pitches, and that is possible with the different operators, which I'll show you when I get back to just a regular unison. But let's go into the shift voice button. So you're going to see unison says 8 right now. That means I can have 8 voices within one key. If I detune, it is slightly detuned right now. If I detune those 8 voices, I can change it to off, or here's off. And they're still detuned. And the spread is still there. There's also reverb. And then the operators are changed to different frequencies, which is why I don't still hear an even unison. But let's turn it to 8 voices. Detune it slightly. And this is really great to get really fat sounds. And then stereo spread, so hearing in surround sound. I'm going to turn the legato so it's always on. Okay, now let's get the operators just so you can see. This is also great to use programs to figure out how to make synth programs, right? So see what's already established, and I can see there are 5 carriers with 1 modulator, and I'm gonna take down that stereo spread, get rid of the detuning. I'm gonna keep the 8 voices. Let's try to tune them together. Build your chords. Detune them. Ooh, that's a nice organ sound now. And that's just an annoying sound to me. Not my favorite synth sound. But that's how we're dealing with the unison voice, the 8 voice unison.
For the next one I chose, kind of going back to arpeggio, which I just said I was not going to do. But this gives a really good example of what's possible with the pitch lanes. If you're familiar with a lot of like Tangerine Dream or 70 Klaus Schulze, like Tangerine, or I said it twice. Berlin School kind of style synthesis and sequencing. This is a really, really cool. We'll actually take this off of the random order. So what we're actually doing is we're just playing one step, but as we kind of increase, let's actually go back to, if we go through each of these steps, we can actually see different pitches that are playing. And we can do this kind of over polyphony. But another thing that's really cool is this, we actually have more than 16 samples loaded up. So as we actually scan through these, we're going to start getting slightly different samples playing, which completely changes the sound. And the nice thing is we can really start adjusting, we have all of our common synthesizer effect modifiers over our samples, and we can start adding in some just pretty unusual sounds. So kind of what I was talking about earlier, starting with a preset that's very harmonic, and now we can kind of take this into a completely inharmonic, more like a drum sound that we started with, like this really nice, almost like kalimba sound. So I think that's a really cool element that we can kind of take with this. I think the presets on this were really, really well designed, and again, like within 30 seconds, just change a couple samples, change a couple, parameters, you're in a completely different place, which I think is awesome.
I'm trying to read some of the questions. Yeah, so using that, almost like using preset performances as your map, and then you can like tweak the little things inside of it. That's a very helpful tool.
Yeah, map is perfect. Thank you for whoever said that.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. Oh, well, hey.
I did say I was reading stuff.
I can't pronounce it. But yeah, that's a really good way to think about it, though. Starting, I've never been someone who likes presets. I don't understand the idea of using presets, but I do think of them as a guide, especially when you have such a complex synthesizer with four voices that can work completely independently or together. It's nice to kind of see these things. There's performances in here that are basically just like techno performances with kick drums and hi-hats and basses. Altering those samples that's playing just one time will give you a completely different sound. So it's nice to kind of see what you can do sometimes, because they'll at least maybe spark some ideas of what might else be possible.
I think somebody asked if you can record modulation. Yeah, that's the motion sequencing element, and yes, the answer is yes. So I can record up to 4 different motions as I'm playing. So if I was like, well, here's my new sound, deep space, 110. If I wanted to, I could record the motion sequence, set that up, and then just change the algorithm over and over, or change an operator. I can record up to 4 different turnings or slidings of the synthesizer with the opsix. Somebody also asked let's hear them together. I also like to layer lots of different synths. If you are just tuning in, I'm Natalie. This is my friend Brett. We were playing a little bit earlier. These will always be saved. You can hear us play together if you rewind later on. And then also we're going to play for you again together after we get through these last two programs and performances. So this FM sound is so great for big, lush sound design, soundscapes, or ambient music, or whatever, however you liked to use this, but I like this deep space sound. Sorry if that was too loud. To showcase since it's so different than just like your chimey sounds, though you can still hear those FM higher frequencies, right, and those overtones always, which is really what. So when would I buy this opsix, or when would I use it? When you want to create those really more bright sounds, you can do it in leads. You can, like I said, drum synthesis, electric pianos, piano sounds, anything that's more chimey or percussive. Great synth for that. But also, if you heard some of the other sounds, you get really great bass. Let me see if I can get a good bass. So cool. I'm just now having fun. Sorry. Forgot we were here. Anyway, for sure, I mean, whatever presets and effects are also in this program, there's definitely great bass tones. You could hear them kind of underlayering in this particular program.
Yeah, and kind of a similar approach on this. I chose the Omanji split. Something that the Wavestate does awesome is you can actually have the keyboard split to be playing different layers, different samples on different sides of the key. So the higher octaves on this patch are a somewhat FM-y sound, this sort of synth sound, which I think is really beautiful. But then if we switch down to lower octaves, I have a more rhythmic sound patch, so
I love this one.
So that's something you can think about, is you can actually choose what layers you're playing via where on the keyboard you're playing.
Yeah, I think did someone say something about split in the chat? I thought I read that. I don't know. Maybe, I believe someone mentioned split.
Yeah, and again, all of the effects are per layer, so we can, change, this layer, this higher layer to be a little bit more abrasive, something a little bit different, and then still preserve our lower layer kind of sequence thing that's happening. So another way to kind of still continue to think about it as like 4, independent or synthesizers kind of working together.
Yeah, someone did. I couldn't find the split question. I thought I had read someone ask about splitting it, but I mean, essentially, yeah. And then I saw another question about the effects comparing between the two. I think they share the same effects, right?
They share the same effects, and the really cool thing about the Wavestate is you can have effects, that are independent per channel, and you can also have global effects. So you can have a global reverb, but you could also have effects on each layer, which I think is really, really awesome. Just another way to completely make the layers independent of each other and be completely different sound. You could have a very delayed, repetitive sound going on that's tempo synced, and you could have a completely washed out reverb sound, then you could have something very tight all kind of going on at once, which I think is really, really interesting.
I see someone just asked Herm about the algorithms on the opsix. I'm not quite sure what you want to know about it, but it does come with 40 preset algorithms. The algorithms are the way that the different operators function together, whether they're carriers or modulators, and then you can go ahead and make your own user algorithms. If you're like, how do I do that? We did do a deep dive in the opsix, so you can go back to some other videos and watch exactly how to navigate to create your own algorithms. They're just a couple steps. I'm not going to do it in this particular stream, sorry, but go back there. It's there. We answered that question, so if you need it, go ahead and find that opsix deep dive. Let's play something together. Oh yeah, perfect timing. Yes. If you have more questions, you can always contact our support or write them in the chat, and maybe we'll go back and be able to answer them if they haven't been. Let's see. Okay. Sorry. And again, thank you, AMS, for sponsoring this stream and being here with us today. I'm Natalie. This is Brett. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in.